Hello there, guys. How are you doing? So, we are going to talk about wheat and the wheat that we eat, the wheat that's grown out there in our country, America. And I've talked about this before, and I learned about this, I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago. And I still am amazed. And I guess that's why I kind of like to talk about it, because I guess I'm kind of a trusting person in general. I mean, I'm just that way. I usually trust people until I get a reason not to, or I trust things, or I trust, our country or whatever. And so I remember, years ago when I was much more young and naive, and I thought, our country would only do what was good for us and things like that. And as the years went on, and I'll never forget one of my friends and mentors just one day looking at me like kind of incredulously, like, what do you think they're doing up there? What's going on in America, and I love our country, it's a money game, and big pharma and big oil own Washington, and our representatives that are up there will tell you that, and they have said that. And in fact, don't waste your time up here lobbying. Go back to your own community and teach people what they need to do to stay healthy, or to stay fit, or to stay safe, or whatever the thing is. So what happened with wheat in our country it's terrible, and it's always just amazed me. And I'm still, after several years, just sort of like, how could that be? But it is. And so I want to tell you about it. And basically, I have some notes here, and these notes come partly from Gary Young, the guy that started Young Living, and partly from Dr. William Davis. So Gary Young has a book. I can't remember the name of it. It's about Einkorn. It might just be called Einkorn. It's in the catalog. And then Dr. William Davis, who's a cardiologist, has a book called Wheat Belly. And now he's got several books after that. There's a Wheat Belly cookbook, several of those. There's just, a few. But the first book was called Wheat Belly. Well, Dr. William Davis was a cardiologist. Well, I guess he's probably not now, but he's a doctor still, but he was a cardiologist in Milwaukee. And he had tons of heart patients. And he was asking the question, why do people have heart disease? And that's what put him on the path that he went down. Now he's basically, I'd say he's probably just an author and a speaker, and he speaks probably all over the world now. Tons of YouTube videos you can find that he does. But and so what he talks about wheat as the unhealthy whole grain. In his speech, he calls, or why we are the unwitting victims in a grand genetic experiment gone sour. And so this is some stuff from him. People have been eating wheat for thousands of years. What's the problem? And he says humans have no business eating grains today. They're not only not good, but they're very destructive. Well, thousands and thousands of years ago, people were hunters and gatherers, and there were fields of grain, and they noticed the animals were eating the grain. And so they learned how to grind that grain down. And so they began to eat what we call the ancestral wild wheat. And it was from the Middle East, and it's called Einkorn. And it's spelled Einkorn. Einkorn. And we're going to, as we go through what happened, we're going to go back to Einkorn, because you can get Einkorn, and that is the good wheat. But you got to know some stuff before that. But Einkorn has 14 chromosomes in it. Okay, so, we are humans, we have 46 chromosomes. To tell you how important a chromosome is, monkeys have 48 chromosomes, and we have two of those chromosomes are different from monkeys. And so chromosomes are a big thing. Einkorn has 14 chromosomes. Now, when we breed with each other or mate with each other, our chromosomes mix, right? We have 23 that comes from mom, and we have 23 that come from dad, and so our child still has 46 chromosomes. But with plants, they combine chromosomes, okay? So they're different than we are. So around, he says, 6,000 BC, wild einkorn mated with another wild grass that also had 14 chromosomes, and this new hybrid was called Emmer, E-M-M-E-R, and that is the wheat they talk about in the Bible. And then I've also heard other people say that it was Einkorn that was talked about in the Bible. So, you know, this is like, I mean, it was thousands of years ago. So, I mean, I guess this is theory, you know. But some of this stuff, there's writing from old. So a lot of this is taken from that. After that, in the Middle Ages, the bread was a staple. It was a staple of the wealthy. And at that time, Emmer mated with another grass and added another 14 chromosomes. And that created what we have today, which we call spelt or triticum. So if you've looked into wheat, you know, there's the different kinds of wheat, and you can find spelt and triticum today. But what we have today in our modern, 2000 year, today is still different again. Okay, so what happened in the last 50, really 60, going on 70 years now? In 1960, there was this huge concern about feeding the population and overpopulation. And so a lot of money was put toward research to figure out how to increase the yield of wheat. And there was a Dr. Borlaug, B-O-R-L-A-U-G. You can look him up on the internet. You can see his picture. He was a main player. And before they started changing things, the wheat, the einkorn, the wheat that, and the einkorn still, Gary Young found the einkorn still growing today over in Morocco. He's growing it now for us, but that kind of wheat stood 5 feet tall. It was literally waving fields of grain. It was a thin stalk, a thin head, and it was as tall as we are. And so today, you go out in the field, it's not that way. It's short, it's thick, it's got a thick stalk, it's got a thick head. And so, but what was going on back then was they started doing a bunch of genetic experiments with all kinds of various strains, thousands of experiments. And Dr. Borlaug was successful in 1970 and was actually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And he came up with what they called a high-yield semi-dwarf strain. It's also called mutant dwarf wheat. That mutant, I always think that should give us a clue, huh? Again, those stalks are now very thick. The seed head, the top, is very large, and it yielded 10 times more wheat per acre. So this was introduced into third world countries. The famine in some places was converted into a surplus within a year. He was heralded a hero and got the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, and so then you've got all these farmers out there growing this wheat. So this guy, his neighbor, all of a sudden is getting 10 times the yield that he's getting. So he's going to join in too. And so before long, everybody is growing this high yield wheat, semi-dwarf wheat. Then a new form of wheat was created called clearfield wheat. And that was created in the Pacific Northwest. There were 1 million acres. On this wheat, they exposed the seeds to a chemical called sodium azide, which was an industrial toxin. And when humans would accidentally ingest that and call poison control, they would say to the person that called, don't even do CPR because you will die too. You just have to let them die. It was that bad. So they're introducing all these kind of mutations. And one thing that they can say is that the wheat has not been genetically modified. So they can say, well, we're not genetically modifying the wheat. But what they're doing is crossbreeding, chemical mutagenesis, gamma mutagenesis, X-ray mutagenesis, all this different kind of crossbreeding. So for 40 years, that's what's been happening with the wheat. And then you've got the FDA that says eat your wheat. And they say eat more grains, but what they really mean is eat more wheat, because 90% of people in the country, they eat wheat. They're not eating random other grains out there. They eat wheat. That's what everybody eats, the majority of the people. The FDA used to say, 60% of your calories should be wheat. Now the more modern quarter of the plate should be wheat. So what started out as a good thing to solve world hunger was then turned into a problem. And so this is not about being gluten-free, which is very popular right now, be gluten-free, but it's kind of for the wrong reasons. And there are people with celiac disease that is important and crucial. They have intestinal destruction from the protein in wheat, gluten. And there are a lot of variations of that sensitivity, but that's about 10% of the people. So this conversation that we're having is for the other 90% of the people, okay? Not someone that's maybe got celiac disease or something like that. So what is wrong with this modern strain of wheat? We have to talk about a protein called gliadin. Gluten is a two-part protein. It's glutenin plus gliadin. And the gliadin is what gives the wheat the stretchiness, okay? The glutenin is what gives the wheat the stretchiness. The gliadin, the non-stretchy part, is the wacky thing, and it's the thing that we don't want, and it's the thing you should take away from this conversation. So this is really interesting. In the 70s, there were quite a few psychiatric hospitals that noticed, not sure how they noticed, somebody probably just said something, that if they took all the wheat out of the diet of their schizophrenic patients, they improved dramatically. And then when they added it back, they got worse. And so they did these 4-week periods. They'd have them on the wheat for 4 weeks, and then they'd have them off the wheat. And they'd get better, they'd get worse. They'd get better, they'd get worse. They did it multiple times. And the getting better was they'd have less hallucinations, less delusions, less paranoia. They weren't completely cured, but they definitely were better. Well, then the NIH, the National Institute of Health, heard all about this, and they decided to get into this and do some research. And they are the ones that boiled it down to gliadin. So upon digestion, it enters your brain and it acts as an opiate. It binds to the opiate receptors in your brain. And the human brain is full of all these little things that are opiate receptors, meaning they will receive something that wants to bind onto it. So for instance, heroin would be an opiate. It's going to go in, it's going to bind to those opiate receptors and, make you high and goofy and can't control behavior or thoughts, whatever. Morphine is another opiate, and that's going to go in, it's going to bind to those opiate receptors, and it's going to get rid of pain, right? Well, wheat and the gliadin in particular is going to go in, you're going to eat it, it's going to go in, it's going to bind to those opiate receptors, and what's it going to do? It's not going to make you high, it's not going to relieve pain, it's going to stimulate your appetite. It does the same thing, but it stimulates the appetite. Well, so they found that out in the 70s, but it just didn't get talked about much. Then after that, some people thought it'd be a good idea to give people these opiate blocking drugs. They did this to help them lose weight. So there was a small study done. People skipped breakfast. They were provided lunch. They had dinner, and they had a total of 1,800 calories. The same people came back a few weeks later. They were told to do the same thing, but they were given an injection of a drug called naloxone, which blocks a morphine overdose within seconds. It's an opiate blocking drug. This time they were eating 1,400 calories. So when that opiate receptor was not blocked, the gliadin attached, and the person their appetite was stimulated and they ate more. So that injection was used for helping people to lose weight. All right, so about the 1985, everything anyone bought with wheat came from the high-yield semi-dwarf strain of wheat. Starting in the mid-'80s, at that same time, there was an explosion in weight in America. And then diabetes followed suit in its increase. Dr. William Davis says we can't prove the cause and effect with this data, but it's very suspicious, and now there's even more. And, well, we're being fed an appetite stimulant. So wheat with the gliadin protein in it is an opiate. Well, what is an opiate going to do to people with eating disorders or people with ADHD or autism or schizophrenic or bipolar? You know, maybe people with ADHD, autism, it's going to create or cause behavior outbursts. It's going to trigger a high or a mania. With people with bipolar, things like that. In just a normal person, it's probably just going to stimulate the appetite. But with people that have those other kind of issues, it's not good. And so what does this do to blood sugar? The high glycemic is going to raise the blood sugar very high. And well, where does wheat come in? Well, it's got very high glycemic numbers. In studies back to 1981, when the glycemic index was created, and so they've known this for a long time, the sucrose, the sugar index number, is 59. The whole grain bread is 72. Isn't that crazy? 2 slices of whole wheat bread raises the glycemic index more than 6 teaspoons of sugar. That's pretty crazy. Whole grain bread. I mean, we're not just talking white bread. And there have been thousands of studies done on showing that wheat raises the blood sugar sky high. So, you got to just know that. Every time you eat some wheat, realize that's what's going on. So as people continue to eat like this, they have repetitive high blood sugar, high blood insulin. What does that do over 5 to 20 years? It creates visceral fat. And it encircles the organs, and it's terrible for your organs and for your body. And so that's where Dr. William Davis got the term wheat belly, which is the name of his book. You can get more into this and get even more science, but that's where I'm going to stop with the science a little bit there. In 1990, though, let's go on with gliadin. They figured out that gliadin has the capacity to unlock the normal intestinal barriers. And I was just listening to something recently about our intestines, our small intestines, and large too, I guess, but the small are, really big. And if you opened up the small intestine and laid it all out, it would cover 2 tennis courts. And isn't that crazy? I couldn't believe that when I heard that. It was a pretty reputable source, though. I forget what the guy's name was. And, that is where everything we eat, everything we put in our body, what we put on our skin, just everything is absorbing into our body. And it's like a sieve. It's like, think of it as pantyhose. And so when things happen in there, you don't want it to be like fishnet stockings. You want it to be tight and healthy. And so it says here, the intestines are really smart, and the intestinal tract will decide what's going to go into the bloodstream. Because if something gets through that intestinal wall, it's going into the bloodstream. Well, the gliadin disables that mechanism and opens those doors and allows foreign substances into the bloodstream. And that is presumed to be why a lot of people will have autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. So scientists say that this gliadin opening of the intestinal tract to the bloodstream acts a lot like cholera outbreak, which is horrible diarrhea. They're saying that gliadin protein in wheat is a lot like the cholera toxin. So that's pretty interesting. So with this gliadin, a thing called germagluten that's in there that's not good, inflammation. You get irritable bowel syndrome, you get acid reflux, colitis, Crohn's disease worsens, joint inflammation, asthma, inflammation of the brain, thyroid, almost every organ. So basically, what are we doing in healthcare? In a lot of healthcare, we're treating consumption of wheat. I mean, that's what it's coming down to. And when you attempt to get wheat out of your diet, there's kind of two levels of it. You know, there's the obvious level, the pasta, the bread, the cakes and pies and crusts and, you know, anything that flour is in. But then there's the secondary, not obvious level of like Campbell's soup or even Twizzlers. I mean, I hope we're not eating that, but you know, we all have our little vices, right? I mean, wheat is in Twizzlers? Why? It's in all frozen dinners, it's in all cereals, it's everywhere. It's in salad dressings. Did I say that? You know, so it's stimulating the appetite and it's stimulating sales, of course, too. So gluten-free is a good thing because you're getting rid of the gliadin, right? You're getting rid of the thing you don't want. But now we say, you know, we're going to go gluten-free and we're going to eat gluten-free foods. You know, these packaged foods that are gluten-free, which I guess on one hand is good, but on the other, and I do it. I mean, I've got stuff at home that's that, but what we've replaced that gluten with is rice starch, corn starch, tapioca starch, potato starch. Look at the ingredients. They'll be on there. And these foods are some of the only ones that raise the blood sugar higher than the wheat does. So if blood sugar is an issue, this is really something to look at. So he's saying gluten-free foods are no better than jelly beans. You know, the processed gluten-free foods, whatever they may be. So what happens when taking wheat out of the diet? There's pretty good weight loss. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. It's easy to see 7 to 15 weeks, you know, of some pretty good weight loss, and then that can slow down because some of that's going to be water. But they're losing the wheat, they're losing the appetite stimulant, and that constant hunger goes away and you're satiated easier. Food obsessions go away, joint pain goes away, back pain goes away, inflammation goes away, high blood pressure goes down over time, drops the LDL particles, there's more energy, clear thinking, on and on. So what do we eat? Well, we just eat the way people ate 100 years ago. You know, we eat real food. We eat single ingredient food, not just the easy fast. I mean, you know, we do live in a modern world, and sometimes we have to do that. But for the most part, if we can just create some ways in our homes to make this easier, and there are ways, there really are ways that a lot of us in this group, in fact, have done over years. But, you know, like what took us a lot of years, hopefully, my hope is always that, you know, I can help someone else do this a whole lot quicker than it took me to do it. But, you know, good foods, you know, meats, unless you're a vegetarian, vegetables, fruits, lots of good fats, olive oil, good coconut oil, walnut, avocado. For me, I like raw dairy. Some people that may not work for, but honestly, if you think you're lactose intolerant, you need to try raw dairy, and because it is a healing food, and it is a gut healing food for a lot of people. Just go to milk-diet.com. If that's something you're wondering about, you'll be amazed at how that's healed people, their gut problems. Okay, so and now I know you guys maybe have heard about Ezekiel bread, and Ezekiel bread is good. It's sprouted from the wheat, but it is still coming from wheat that has the gliadin and the wheat germa gluten in it, and so it's not einkorn. I mean, it's still, you know, from the wheat that's got lots of chromosomes in it, and, you know, the mutant dwarf wheat. So what can you do? You can find einkorn. First of all, if you've got some of those issues, if you've got gut issues, and boy, most of us do to one degree or another because we live in this modern world. But if you've got, other issues that are just like autoimmune diseases, stuff with the brain. I mean, there's a gut-brain connection, serious gut-brain connection. My advice is to get off wheat and grain altogether for a while. And it may be a long while. It may be a couple of years. Maybe it won't be that long. I don't know. But I think what has to happen is your gut has to heal. And it's not going to heal if you keep putting that in there. Honestly, even if it's Einkorn, if you're at a certain point with that. Now, if you're okay, or if you've already been through that healing process, then try the Einkorn. And you can get Einkorn, well, Young Living has some stuff. It's in the new catalog, it's on page 101. See, there's some boxes of different things. They have Einkorn flour, Einkorn pancake and waffle mix. There's one that is gluten-free. And there's the granola. There's the chocolate-coated Wolfberry Crisp bars. I love those. There's rotini pasta. There's spaghetti, Einkorn. So you can get those. You can also, I've seen it like at Whole Foods. If you have a Whole Foods near you or some kind of store like that, you should be able to find Einkorn. I don't know if you can find Einkorn flour already ground, but I'm pretty sure you can find the Einkorn wheat berries. And if you get a wheat grinder, I like the Nutrimil, you can grind your own, and it's easy. It's no big deal. Grind your own, grind a bunch, and then just put it in your fridge and you'll have it for whenever you need it. So there's other places you can get it. There's a brand called Jovial, Jovial, and I order monthly from AzureStandard.com. We have a semi that comes to Enid once a month, and they're like the middleman. So basically that's who delivers to Whole Foods. So I'm actually getting a cheaper price. And every month I have an order that I get off that semi truck, and so you can get that from there, I know too. So there's options. But I like to order the flour already ground up from Young Living and the pancake mix just to have it because it's easy. It's already made. I can just grab it and it's easy. Like, we got to make it easy too. Okay. So that's my speech. I hope that was informative for you. Again, those books are called Wheat Belly, or just go to YouTube and search Dr. William Davis. Listen to one of his speeches. I want to show you the name. Let me find the book here. 136. Because you can also order Gary's book about Einkorn. Ancient Einkorn. There it is. There's the book right there, if you can see it right there. It's a small book. It's an easy read. It is $9 wholesale. And in this illuminating book, Dr. Gary Young chronicles the history of ancient grains and tracks their changing relationships with humans, from staff of life to potentially harmful ingredients, hybridized wheat, and genetically modified grains found in nearly every food product. It discusses the benefits of Einkorn grain, an ancient heirloom grain that remains untouched by hybridization. It also describes how some of the chemicals in our food today are found to be responsible for health challenges. So that is an important part of this journey, of this natural health journey. People are like going to the hospital to get all, medicalized up and good gracious surgery sometimes, when the problem is what they're eating. It's like an overconsumption of wheat, and so that's not necessarily necessary. Just maybe go on a few months of taking that completely out of your diet and see what happens before going to those really drastic measures. You guys, my dad was a surgeon. I grew up I grew up in a medical world. I understand it. My husband's mother was a surgeon and an OBGYN. We grew up in that world. And so I kind of grew up like, it was no big deal. Like having surgery was commonplace, And so it was kind of weird. And the older I got and the more I researched it and the more I realized, oh my gosh, there's some serious risk in that. I mean, that's what ended up I ended up having 2 home births. I had a C-section with my first birth, and the next 2, after I did a bunch of research and found out the potential problems that could happen in a hospital just with a birth and with a C-section, more so, but even just with a birth, for me, my peace came doing it at home. Now, I'm all about, if you feel the peace by doing it in the hospital, then do it. Absolutely do it. You got to do what your faith whatever you have faith in, that's what you need to do. But research it, okay? And, try some of those things out before going to those extreme measures, unless, you're in an extreme situation. So, okay, guys, I really wanted to get that out. And hi, Alicia. And hope that it was beneficial to you. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.